Now, we've been looking at the elbow escape in considerable detail out of side control. It's time for us to switch our emphasis now to a new form of escape. This is the knee escape. This involves me getting up to my knees underneath my opponent's body weight. And as a result, typically we get into a single leg situation where we can either look for reversals or we can sit back to guard position. Let's look first at the movement just solo, just me by myself. And we're going to look at the idea of what's required to mechanically get up underneath someone's body weight. Remember, this is a bit of a challenge. You've got a 250-pound man on top of you. You've got to get underneath his body weight, move underneath, and get up and put him down. That's quite a tall order. So we're going to need some technique to do that. So I have an imaginary opponent out to my right-hand side. From here, everything starts, in these cases, with getting an underhook on my training partner. Don't worry, I'll talk more about that shortly. From the underhook situation with my training partner, we're going to pull our elbow back in towards our own rib cage, just like so. I'm going to create a top leg and a bottom leg. And from here, we're going to scissor our legs, and we're going to focus on getting a hold of our training partner's leg, coming up into a situation where I can lock a single leg, just like so. Okay, and from here, we're in a position where we can put them down or sit back to the safety of guard position. So the whole idea is to create a situation, much as we did before, where I have a top leg and a bottom leg. Then I just put my hips on the ground. I use the underhook to create a situation where one arm is reaching and one arm is retracting. So I have an arm going forward and an elbow going backwards, just like so. And then from here, I scissor my legs. We get a hold of our training partner's leg, and everything now is about getting up to our base and latching onto his leg. Now, the way I do this is a little bit different from most. I encourage my students to grab one-handed on their opponent's leg. I know I just demonstrated with locked hands, that's the conventional method, but I'm not a big advocate of locked hands on single legs down on the mat. Standing position, I am a big advocate of locked hands, but not so much down on the floor. Let's have a look at this with Matthias across our side. From here, we're going to start with an underhook in place, okay? Because I have an underhook, it's relatively simple for us to move our training partner's body weight, okay? I'm going to start, as we always do, with an asymmetrical bridge and a movement that gets my opponent's head moving like so. From here, I'm going to put one hand around my training partner's leg, and I'm going to snake my arm around the knee just like so. My second elbow comes back to my own body, and we're going to hold on in this position. From here, I'm going to take my two legs and scissor them, one over the other. And as a result, I can quickly come up into a position where we've got the control over our training partner's leg. I've got a base of support with my second hand. I have the potential to lock my hands if necessary, but generally from the situation, I favor open hands. From here, if necessary, I can switch to a double leg. I can come around the corner with single legs if my opponent puts on a whizzer. There's various kinds of ways that I can act in situations like this to take my training partners back and what have you. Let's start off with considerations of why do I favor holding with one hand? Okay, I'll demonstrate it by myself first. Too often I see people get into situations like this and they lock their hands way too early. This is a disaster because now I've extended my bottom arm. Remember, to get up, I need a bottom leg, a top leg, and I need a top arm and a bottom arm. The top arm is my reaching arm, and it extends. The bottom arm is my contracting arm, and its responsibility is bring the elbow in. The further my elbow is away, the more difficult it is for me to get up. So our whole thing is to pull this elbow in. Then I reach with the second one, I hold the leg one-handed, and then it's so easy for us to come up into a position where we're up on our base. So, once again, we're going to start off with the underhook in place. Everything begins with moving his body weight and getting our head inside his crossface. Now from here, if I go in and I catch a hold of my training partner's leg. There's my top leg, there's my bottom leg, and now in one motion we just start that scissoring action that takes us up into a position where we're in on our training partner's leg. Now from here, how I go to react is largely bound up with his reaction. Does he have a whizzer? Does he not have a whizzer? Am I able to access the second leg, or does he put the leg up? What should I be looking to do? We'll largely be bound up with his reaction. A lot of the times we're looking to get our knee behind his ankle and work from situations like this. But however we choose it, it's very, very important that we focus on this one-handed grip. So often I see sad things like this happen. People do a good job of getting the underhook. They do a good job of turning onto their side, but they lock their hands too early. If you raise your left hand, Matthias, left hand, you'll see my hands are locked too early here. So as Matthias puts on a whizzer and sprawls, I come up underneath his body weight and I physically cannot get up and I'm stuck underneath. If I had the confidence, Loctite, if I had the confidence to pull my elbow back, Matthias, put all your weight on me. Matthias says all his weight on me means nothing. I can easily come up to my base, and then from here we start that action of turning around behind our training partner and getting everything into a winning situation. Okay, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on these knee escapes coming up to the single leg situation. They're a very, very important addition to your side control escapes. I put them right up there with the elbow escape in terms of importance. I want to talk to you about a very important topic for completing a knee escape, and this is the idea of beating a crossface. Remember, the one thing that'll stop you turning into your opponent, even if you do have an underhook, is your opponent's crossface shoulder. If he's got a strong and authoritative crossface, you won't be able to turn into him and you won't be able to get up to your knees. So it's absolutely critical that you have the skill of beating the crossface once you've got the underhook. The good news is, it's pretty damn easy if you know what you're doing. So, my opponent's across my side, I've gotten the underhook, but Matthias still has a strong crossface. As he goes, it doesn't matter whether his hands are locked, we'll look at locked for now, or open. If he puts crossface pressure on, I cannot turn into a crossface. You hear me struggling as this is going on. The good news is you've got an underhook, okay? So as Matthias goes to apply his pressure, I'm going to take my 2 feet and we're going to use that underhook to get our head to our training partner's chest. My goal is to get my forehead to Matthias's sternum. That's what we're looking for. That's the goal of my head position, okay? Matthias always has his goal as his shoulder inside my jaw. But once I have the underhook in place, it's relatively easy for me to bridge and shoot my arm so that my head goes right into the sternum. Now, when Matthias goes to apply a crossface, there's just nothing to work with. And as a result, it's very easy for me to come in and secure my training partner's leg, one-handed as we always prefer. Once we get that one-handed grip, it's all about my ability to turn onto my side. As he goes to apply his whizzer, we come up into the one-handed situation, just like so. Now we're in a good position. We'll be looking at a whole bunch of ways to work from here to either put our opponent down or get towards his back. That's the simple way we go to beat the crossface in these situations. One more time. I've managed to work my way into an underhook. No matter how much pressure my opponent puts in on that crossface, we can always get our head into the sternum by that bridging method. The key element is once again the idea of hip extension. Now, instead of me using a bicep crossface, we're using the underhook. The whole key is this lift and drive so that my whole body comes up onto my shoulder, the ball of my foot, and the other ball of my foot. My arm reaches, I have an extending arm and a contracting arm. I seize my training partner, and from here, I put my hips on the floor. And as a result, we can quickly come up into the single leg situation. One more time from another angle. There's my underhook. My opponent has his crossface. Now from here, we start that bridging action, and my head goes into the sternum. From this position, I can't have my arms locked out, extended like so. So I always want my elbow back towards myself. There's that scissoring effect, which puts me up into a position where I can turn in on my training partner and go to work. Now, let's move on to the next aspect of the knee escape series. You've heard me say it, no knee escape is going to occur until I get an underhook. Now, an underhook is a desirable thing for me to have as the athlete in the bottom position. Your opponent also is interested in securing the underhook when he's on top. So there's going to be a battle. Who gets the underhook? I want it, he wants it. It's impossible for me to hit these knee escapes without the underhook. The question now is, how are you going to get an underhook on a guy who doesn't want you to get an underhook? He's fighting for his underhook. I'm fighting for mine. How am I going to get it against his resistance? Let's have a look at that question right now. The easiest way to get into underhooks is to begin with a forearm reverse crossface, just like so. Okay, it's not an easy thing just to dig in on an underhook, especially with a gi on under normal circumstances. Typically, he will leave no space between his armpit and your chest, and it's very hard to dig in. Things get even more difficult when my opponent goes ear to ear, like so. And now, not only can I not dig in, it's actually dangerous for me to start reaching in. I could get wrist locked in this position. I can also get American locked. All kinds of bad things can happen. So, how am I going to get into an underhook on a resisting person? Well, typically, when things first start off, when I first feel someone go into a pin, I always like to take my left hand to my opponent's left shoulder, just like so. Okay. As he goes to nestle into a powerful pin and get ear to ear on me, it's quite difficult for him to get the ear to ear position. If my opponent starts off ear to ear, this can be a real problem. Okay, so even as someone gets into a side pin, I just put my left hand on their left shoulder. Now when they go ear to ear, it's quite difficult for them to achieve. From this position, as he goes to apply pressure, we're going to start with an action of moving his head, just like so. I'm going to put my forehead inside his crossface. So my head position goes just inside. When he goes to apply a crossface now, it's impossible. The only way someone can apply a crossface is to apply it to my jaw. When I put my forehead inside the bicep, that becomes all but impossible. And now it's safe for me to pommel my arm in as an underhook. He will probably go to flatten me out at this point, but it doesn't matter because I've got my underhook in place. Once the underhook's in, it's hard for him to regain it for himself. Now from here, as always, we start that same action of turning inside our opponent. Now, we scissor and we come up into our favorite attacking position from underneath with that single leg in place. Once again, a different angle. I always like from the beginning to get my left hand to my opponent's left shoulder or vice versa. And as a result, when he goes to get ear to ear positioning, to prevent me getting underhooks, it's very, very difficult. Now, from here, we start that strong bridging action that moves his head. Once I can move his head, I've opened up a huge space to feed my hand in as an underhook. And from here, I go in and I score my training partner's calf muscle. Now from here, I scissor my legs, and we end up in on our training partner's legs, ready to play. Let's have a look at it from another angle so you can see exactly what I'm trying to do in this situation. In order for me to get to an underhook situation, I have to maximize the distance between Mateus's armpit and my chest, because that's the space to which my underhook will go. Mateus has the exact opposite goal. He wants to minimize that space by locking in here and putting his ear to my ear. And now he's minimized the space successfully. However, if I have my left hand on his left shoulder and he goes to minimize that space, I can always open it up. And did you see what happened? There's now a mountain of space between his armpit and my shoulder. And as a result, I can drive a truck through that kind of space. I put my head on the inside and my hand pommels through and around. Okay? As my opponent goes to put weight on me now, it doesn't matter. You've got the underhook in place. And now, it's a simple matter of beating this crossface. We saw how to do that in an earlier segment. Now we scissor and we come up. And we're in a good position now to line up with our training partner and get it to our offense. Okay? This is an excellent way to score underhooks on a resisting opponent. Now, I know what you're thinking. What if you can't get your hand to the shoulder? What if you just shut out? How are you going to get an underhook now? Okay? Let's look at that right now. Okay. We've got a skilled opponent on top, and he did a good job of stopping us from getting our hand here to this desirable position. Okay, so we're stuck out here in the cold. What are we going to do now to get an underhook? Well, you can probably guess from what we said earlier, we're going to use the bicep crossface. From this position, we're going to start that action of moving my training partner's head just like so. Now, I'm going to take my second hand, and as we move away from my opponent, he comes back up on top. I'm going to put my second hand in here, inside his shoulder. Now, I can use my hands in unison to lock, just inside his shoulder like so. As he tries to put weight on me, we just use a simple bumping action to use the strength of both hands, and we can pommel in and get our underhook in place. Now from here, we swivel our legs, and once again, we find ourselves in the perfect position to start putting weight on our training partner and coming around the corner. Now, some other common tactics for getting into underhooks. Again, we have an opponent working in this position. Very often, our opponent will have his hands locked and his head in very, very close, and this will make it extremely difficult to get the underhook in place. Bear in mind, however, that as my opponent shuts out my left arm, he often opens up space for my right knee, and I come in just like so. Once I get the knee in, we're halfway towards an elbow escape. And from here, it's not a difficult thing for us to stand over our training partner's calf muscle and start to move my head away from him. As I move my head away from him, my second hand can come inside and take the inside position. Then I bring my elbow over the top as he goes to correct his body. This is the perfect time for us to get in underneath our training partner and start scissoring and coming up into our training partner's legs. And from here we can come around the corner and start scoring reversals out of this position. These are some common means by which I like to score underhooks on my opponent and get up into our knee escapes. Now, I want to make an important point about anchoring ourselves to our opponent as we come up from a knee escape. The anchoring point is your opponent's leg. Essentially what you're doing is you're coming up with an underhook and you're scoring a single leg. That's really what you're doing. From the single leg situation, you're using his leg as an anchor to pull yourself up to your knees and then reverse your opponent. You can do it by completing a single leg, you can take his back, you can sit back to guard, you can do all these things. I'll be showing them in some detail very soon. But it all begins in the same way. You've got to anchor yourself to your opponent's leg. The big theme that I'm trying to push on you is that when we're doing single legs down on the mat, I generally prefer holding with one hand snaked around my opponent's calf rather than locking my hands. Let's have a look why. Matthias is over here on your knees. Okay, if I have a single leg situation with Matthias and my hands are locked and we're down on the mat, when my head goes down in positions like this and Matthias puts on a wisdom and starts sprawling, I don't care how strong you are, when he goes to sprawl, you're going to get stretched out, he starts sprawling, and your hands are going to break apart. As your head goes down, you lose the ability to hold on to the leg, and the hands come apart, and he's gone. Okay? Let's contrast that with the idea of holding one-handed. Okay? Ironically, one hand turns out to be stronger than two in these situations. When I hold with locked hands, he's just fighting the grip of my hands. But when I hold with one hand and I snake my wrist with a false grip around my training partner's calf, he's not fighting the strength of my hands, he's fighting the extension of my arm. It's a very different thing. Now when he goes to sprawl, I can easily hold on. And it's relatively simple for me to start the action of coming around the corner and putting knees in behind, stepping over his leg, etc., etc. Okay? It's strange to think that one hand should turn out to be stronger than two in these circumstances. It's not because it's stronger, it's just because it's a different kind of battle. When I lock my hands, he's fighting against the grip of my hands, and of course his leg's always stronger than the grip of my hands, and they fly apart. But when I snake my arm around his calf muscle, he's fighting the reach of my arm, and that is a difficult battle for him to win. So once again, from a single leg situation, what I'm going to advocate is that when you come up, we snake our arm here around his calf muscle. Now when he goes to sprawl, I can easily carry his weight. And from here, it's not a difficult thing for us to hold on to the leg. Ironically, if I locked my hands in here and he sprawled, I would quickly get extended and put into a weak position with my head down. But when I hold like so and my opponent goes to sprawl, I can easily hold on to him and stay on my base. And from here, it's not a difficult thing for us to start the various kinds of actions that we favor from this position and start putting him down towards the floor. So, when you come out of any knee escape, I strongly advocate coming up with one-handed grips. Practice the action of snaking your arm with a bent wrist around your training partner's calf muscle. Don't grab the knee. Don't hook into the knee like so. When he sprawls, your arm has no extension and you lose the grip quickly. Rather, snake around the calf muscle. When he goes to sprawl, you can easily hold on to it. And it's not a difficult thing under these circumstances to start reaching out with your legs and making effectiveness on your training partner to put people down. There's also a vast number of other moves we can do from there. We'll be looking at them shortly. But I always favor the idea, once I have an underhook in place, and I beat my training partner's crossface, to hold one-handed here. Now as he sprawls, even under his full sprawl, even under his full sprawl, I can easily come up to my base. And from here, it's not a difficult thing for us to start putting people down from bottom position. This method of coming up with one-handed grips is always the one that I favor. Just make sure the grip is on the calf muscle with a false grip. Your arms snaking around the calf, not locked hands and not grabbing the knee. Okay, we've looked at the idea of coming up to our knees underneath our opponent's body weight, courtesy of an underhook and the scissoring body movement, which gets us up into a single leg situation. We've seen that if we hold a one-handed grip, we can get up underneath even a full sprawl, get up to our knees and start climbing around towards our training partner's legs. Now it's time to actually hit the escape. There's a bunch of different options you got here. You can either put your opponent down and take top position. That's a very dramatic form of escape. You've gone from bottom position side into top position. That's wonderful. Another option is to take your opponent's back. If he goes into certain kinds of defensive grips, we can take his back. That's huge. Nothing ever beats taking somebody's back. That's the best thing that can happen. And the most conservative option is simply to sit back to guard. And that's not a bad option, especially if the guy is significantly heavier and stronger than you. You were pinned across side, now you came up to your knees, you sat back, and you got him back in guard. Let's have a look at these three options. I'm going to look first at the idea of putting our opponent down. This is always a good option. It's nice to be able to come out of a side pin, get up, and then authoritatively put the other guy down. Okay, you were in a losing situation, now you're on top, and the tide of the battle has turned somewhat. So this is always a desirable option. Let's look at that first. Some things about this. We're advocating the idea of a one-handed single leg. What should we do once we've got up to a situation where he's on two knees and we're in on the single leg situation? Okay. The primary thing you're going to be battling against here is a sprawl. And what I'm trying to get you guys away from is the idea of just locking on, whereas he sprawls, my arms separate and my head goes down. Okay, as soon as your head goes down to the floor in situations like this and you get extended, you're just in such a mechanically weak position that it's very, very hard for you to recover. There are some things you can do from there, I'm not going to lie to you, but it's hard work. As a general rule, I prefer holding one-handed and using mobility around our opponent to start putting them down, and specifically to start incorporating the strength of our legs. What I don't want to do is get into a battle of my hands against my opponent's legs and hips. That's always a losing gambit. The other thing I don't want to do is work from a mechanically disadvantageous posture where my head is down and I'm extended. Okay, so the big things we're going to incorporate, the idea of using our legs to finish the takedown, not our arms, and the idea of holding body posture in an advantageous way where we can be mechanically strong. One of the reasons why I favor one-handed grips in this situation is that so I can use my second hand, either my hand or my elbow, as a post. So that as Mateus goes to sprawl, that puts a limit on how far my head goes down. If my elbow collapsed and my head went down and he goes to sprawl, I lose control of him immediately because I've got into a mechanically weak position. But as long as my head and chest are up when he goes to sprawl, I can hold his weight comfortably. You can hear, even as he puts on a full whizzer and sprawls, my voice is not changing. I'm not working hard here, okay? But if my head starts to go down, he starts to sprawl, you can hear my voice changing rapidly as I have to work harder and harder to get anything done. So, We've come up successfully. Our opponent goes into a sprawl. What's our first option here? First option is to start walking my right knee towards his right knee. I slide my knee in just like so. I'm going to step my left foot over my training partner's ankle. I'm going to hook onto my training partner's ankle. So now I have my legs in on him just like so. Okay. As he goes to apply his whizzer in this position, we're going to use this grip to start bringing our head up. Okay. You probably want to hold a better brace than that. Now, from here, look how I start walking a circle on my training partner. I've got his leg hooked. He's going to try and stay up as best he can. He can put his hands on the floor, he can do whatever he wants. Okay? But I'm going to start an action of turning a corner on my training partner. So I'm walking in a circle. It's hard for my opponent to follow those motions. Okay? Now, I just reach across and I score my training partner's ankle. Now, from here, my hand goes across to the opposite knee, and I put my elbow over his knee, just like so. When Mateus tries to get up from here, it's so difficult, and he'll always expose either his back, as he just did, or if he holds a whizzer, he'll expose his side on the other side. So, once again, from the single leg situation, down on the mat. From here, I feel my opponent going to sprawl. We hook in just like so. From here, I bring my leg up and I slide my knee towards his knee. And I step over the top and I hook. Now, once we make this hook in position, look how I start the action of rotating and turning until I can access his ankle. Now from here, I access the knee, I go over the top, and we lock for the finish. If I see him coming up on his hand, look out from whizzer. From here, I put my hand on his wrist and I feed the wrist in and drive forward to put his shoulder on the mat, and we end up in an advantageous position. Once again, we've gotten up to the single leg situation, down on the mat. As he goes to sprawl, we hold one-handed. I slide my knee towards his knee and I hook into his leg. Very often from here you can just put him straight down, okay? But if there's a struggle and you're having a hard time putting them down, we circle until we can access the ankle. And then from here, we start moving it. As we reach for the wrist, he tries to get up. We just put our hand through there and seize the wrist. And now, as a result, we're in and our opponent's pinned shoulder down to the mat. This is one excellent way of working out of the single leg situation and scoring a complete reversal. Now let's continue our work with coming up to a single leg situation out of a knee escape and putting our opponent down to the mat. The method we're going to look at now is one of my all-time favorites. Let's start with a single leg situation. Down on the mat, we're holding one-handed. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to fight to get my elbow to the floor inside his shin bone. The way I do this is I hold my training partner here at the knee. As Mateus goes to sprawl, I'm going to focus in these situations on turning to face the same direction he is. And I'm going to take my knees off the mat. Do you see what that just did? It forced Mateus's other knee to the floor. That's what my goal is. If Mateus's knee is off the mat, it's hard for me to finish takedowns here. He's got a strong sprawling position. So what we do is we come with our knees off the mat. And all I do is I just circle and walk, and it forces his knee down to the floor. Now I take my knee and I put it behind his ankle, just like so. He's forced to work with his whizzer. Now from here, I grip my training partner at the knee and I go across to the second ankle and I start pulling that ankle inwards. From this position, it's not a difficult thing for us to go over the top and into the same finishing position we just saw. This is one of my absolute favorite ways to work. So, from a single leg situation, I have my elbow down on the floor, Mateus goes to sprawl, and we hold on nice and tight. From this position, look how I take my hand and I come in here and seize around my training partner's knee. Now, I take my knees off the floor and tripod. As I walk around the corner, I easily put my opponent's opposite knee to the mat. I put my knee in behind my training partner's ankle, and we're in perfect position now to go across to the second leg. I can pull in here. I can even go above the knee and drive my training partner down and score my reversal. Whether you go to the ankle or to the knee, I leave that up to you. It'll depend on things like the height of your opponent's legs, his ability to split his legs far apart, things like this. But both the ankle and the knee are both viable targets. So, switching the angle from the single leg situation. Here, I have my wrist around his legs. He goes to sprawl back and away. I keep my body frame. Look how I move around the corner and I take my elbow down inside like so. I hug onto my training partner's knee and I sweep my legs around the corner. And as a result, I can return his opposite knee to the mat. I put my knee inside his ankle. From here I go across and I catch either here or here. And then from this position, I start walking him down to the mat. Now, let's look at some common errors in this position. Probably the single most common error I see is this. People do a good job of getting elbow deep and then they just stay static. They just stay here. They think, oh, I'm elbow deep, I'm good. No, you're not good. This is not a good position. If my opponent puts his right shoulder on the floor, he can roll into an omoplata from this position. And now you're fighting your way out of omoplatas and potentially triangles as well. Okay? So this is not a position to stay static. On the contrary. Once I get my elbow in here, it's very, very important that I start that action of moving and getting my ankle in behind, like so. And now there's no roll to an omoplata. Now from this position, it'll be pretty easy for us to go across to the second ankle and start gathering up my opponent's legs. Okay? Another very, very common mistake, and this one's going to happen to you 1,000 times unless you look out for it. Don't reach for your opponent's waist. Don't reach for the waist. So, I see this every day. Okay, here's a mistake that is so natural, but you got to avoid it. Guys do a good job of coming around the corner, like so. From here, they put their knee in behind the ankle, and they make a tragic mistake. They go up to the waist. Now your opponent has a whizzer on you, and as he applies the whizzer, you get returned straight away to the mat. Okay? If there's one thing you get out of this move, get this out of it. Stay below his buttocks with your arm. Don't go above the buttocks to the waist and give him a free whizzer. When you work below the buttocks and go for the knee and the ankle, you'll put a lot of people down. You go above the hips and buttocks up to the waist, and you'll be the one getting put down. So, when we lock up here with our training partner, look how I come around the corner and I turn like so. I focus on getting my knee here behind his ankle so he can't roll to an omoplata. Now I capture the knee and look how my arm reaches across below the buttocks. I never come up to the waist where I give him leverage with his whizzer. I always stay down here with my shoulder behind where I can access the ankle or the knee and put him down to the floor. Okay? Let's have a look at all this again. From a situation where I had an underhook on my training partner and I came up, it's like so. Our whole thing in these situations is to catch a hold of our training partner's knee and turn it on the hips. And as a result, we can block the ankle. Then I go across here to the knee, across to the second ankle, or even across to the second knee, like so. And then from this position, we put our opponent's hips on the floor, and lo and behold, we're in a good position to score our reversal. Done in this fashion, you'll put a lot of people down coming out of bottom side control. Now, we're looking at this idea of escaping from side control, courtesy of the underhook, and coming up into our opponent's legs, into a single leg situation off our knees. This, in my mind, is probably the second most significant method of escaping out of side control, only beaten by the elbow escape in terms of effectiveness in modern day competition. So it's absolutely critical that we be very, very strong in this method. It has a bonus too. It offers you the opportunity to not only escape from your opponent's pin, but to go up and put him down on his back. So you literally completely turn the match around. Your bottom pin, and now you're on top of the guy. So that's a truly noteworthy thing. There's a bunch of different options that we get when we come up to our knees underneath our opponent. The first option I want you to become strong at is the single leg down on the mat and put your opponent down. There are other options that we'll be looking at soon, but this single leg option is the first one. Now, there is a problem associated with this. You're coming up underneath his body weight into a situation where he can sprawl heavily upon you. So the big skill that you guys have to develop is the skill of moving under your opponent's body weight and still being effective. It's easy to get intimidated when you come up into a single leg and you feel a heavy sprawl. You get stretched out, your arms get extended, and you're like, oh, let me just sit back to guard. We'll see later on, there are good ways to sit back to guard. Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying too is you can't be intimidated by the first time you feel some body weight on top of you. You can't stop just because the guy just sprawls on you. If we hold our body in mechanically efficient fashions, you can easily continue to a successful completion of the single leg, even against a decent sprawl. The question is, do you know how to hold your body in an efficient fashion? And that's what we're going to cover right now. So, we look at the idea that we're bottom side control. We've managed to get an underhook on our training partner. We know that once we get that underhook, we want to work up here by the head. We never use our underhook down here by the hips. We work up at the head. From this position, we start that action of bridging and shooting our head underneath our training partner's chest. So he's no longer chest to chest on top of us. From here, we come down to our training partner's leg and we take our one-handed grip that we generally favor. My elbow goes inside his knee, and then from this position, we scissor our legs and we come up into a single leg situation. I want to be perpendicular to my training partner's body. I don't want to be squared up underneath him, lined up like so. I always want that perpendicular angle, okay? Now, my opponent wants to square up to me and sprawl. That's always what he's looking for, okay? We'll see how to deal with that later. But initially, what I want to do is hold one-handed and snake my hand around his calf muscle. Let's move around this way so the camera can pick this up. So, I want to hold one-handed and snake my hand here. So when he goes to sprawl, I can hold on successfully through the extension of my arms, okay? Now, we have a bunch of options here. I can slide my knee towards his knee and step over his ankle. That was one good option. But the one I'm currently looking at is the option of going through on my training partner, elbow deep around my training partner's calf. And from here, we're in a position to start to move around behind with our intention to get our knee inside of our training partner's ankle, okay? So that's our intention. That's our big picture that we're working with here. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the proper body mechanics to get up underneath your opponent's resisting body weight and get through to your opponent's leg and get behind him. There's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. I'll just demonstrate the solo first. Okay, so often I see people get up to the single leg situation. They're in on the leg, and the first thing is you got to get your knees off the mat. Okay, if I stay on my knees in this position, it's just my hands versus his legs, okay? I've got to incorporate my legs into the picture. So we need to get our knees up off the mat. Now, the most common error that I see whenever people get their knees off the mat is they have their hips in a symmetrical position. They come up like this. That puts no weight on my opponent's legs and hips. What I want to do is come up with my hips asymmetrical, like so. And I back step around the corner. A lot of times I even sweep my legs in an exaggerated fashion, where I sweep my legs back all the way like so, and I move back with one hip down and one hip up, never with my hips even symmetrical like so. Always asymmetrical hips, one high, one low, and as a result I can put tremendous weight and pressure on my opponent's legs and hips. We'll bring Mateus back. Okay, we'll just start in the single leg situation for now. We'll start on this side so the camera can see. Okay, he's got his leg up, so I can't switch to a double leg. If Mateus was naive and he had two knees on the mat, there's no reason from here why I can't just switch to a double leg and put him down. So Mateus is a good man, and it keeps his leg away from me like so. Now he's going to have a strong whizzer in here like so, okay? From the single leg situation, I take my knees off the mat, and look how from here I start that action of putting one hip up and one hip down, just like so. This puts tremendous weight on my training partner's hips and legs. The action of walking back and around quickly collapses him, and we're now in a situation where I can easily get my knee behind his ankle, and from here make the transition either to the second knee or to the second ankle. And we can walk him down to the mat. This puts tremendous pressure on my training partner's quadricep. Let's have a look at it again, the other angle. So here we are, we've gotten in on that single leg situation, okay? If I stay with my knees on the mat, this is a losing gambit. So instead, we're going to focus on this idea of turning our hips and taking our knees off the floor. And it puts this grinding pressure on my training partner. It makes it so easy to transition in behind my training partner's ankle. And then from here, we can get through to the second leg and put that man down. So once again, the key element is this idea. When we come up off our knees, we never come up symmetrical. We always come up asymmetrical and start that action of sweeping around the corner with asymmetrical hips. This is the only way to apply true grinding pressure on your opponent's thigh and hip to put them down to the mat. Now, let's talk about hand grips from this position. You've got a couple of options here, and they're all good. For a situation where we come up into a single leg here, typically most people lock their hands, okay? In the standard configuration, if my left arm is the outside arm, my left hand will be the top hand. That's the standard way of working, okay? But when we go down on the mat with a single leg and we want to finish, what I'm going to advocate is we switch our hands to this configuration here. I unlock my hands and I just put my hand over hand in this position, and I just come up and I just put two hands on the floor. And as a result, we can easily get around behind our opponent and get our elbow to the mat. And as a result, we can easily get behind the ankle and then start hunting for the second ankle or the second knee and put him down to the floor. So I'll just demonstrate solo. Here, my hands are locked, palm to palm. I just turn my hands and I go like so. I'll come closer to the camera so you can see. Here I have a palm to palm grip, single leg, and I just turn my hands like so. You can have your hands close together, but what we don't want is hands locked for this particular variation of the single leg. I just come down hand to hand and then a tripod, asymmetrical hips, and walk around and move behind my opponent. This greatly facilitates the action of getting around your opponent's leg to a position behind him. So here again we have Mateus. We've come up successfully from a side position and we've locked in. We've got our hands locked initially, and look how I just place my hands down. Okay, now I start an action of extending my arms. If my hands are locked in tight and he sprawls, I lose the grip very quickly. Okay, so in this situation, I start off, look at my hands come up, my elbows come up off the floor, and it's that which facilitates this turn around behind my opponent. And as a result, we get our knee in behind him, we get through to the second leg, and we drive him down to the floor. So the action, just by myself now, Mateus, is initially we're in on the leg, the hands go down, the arms extend, and look how my chest goes over my own hands. When my chest is over my own hands, it's so easy to come up with asymmetrical hips and walk behind our training partner. So here we have a single leg situation down on the mat. Look, I have my hands reconfigured, just like so. I bring my chest, as my arms extend, I bring my chest over my hands. The further my chest from my hands, the easier Mateus to sprawl. So we lock up, he goes to sprawl, the hands go in, and my chest goes forward over the hands. I turn my body so we've got asymmetrical hips. We start that action of walking around behind, and we hit the double leg from the back. So I'll just quickly review this by myself. We're in on a single leg with an imaginary opponent down on the mat. We lock up. The first thing is we put hands down on the floor. We go away from locked hands to hands on the mat. I bring my chest over my own hands so that my chest and head is high. I never want my head down low in a weak mechanical position. Then from here we go asymmetrical hips, and we walk around behind our opponent and get our knee behind the ankle, and we either go reverse double leg or we grip the ankle. So one more time. We've come up. We're in here on the leg. Then from here we put the hands down. Look how we start that action of turning our hips around the corner. I bring my chest over my hands, and there's that walk around the corner. I place my knee in behind, and from here we access the second leg and put Mateus down. Now let's look at a super important detail involved in finishing the single leg down on the mat when we've come up from a knee escape from bottom side control. You will notice let me rephrase that. I want you to pay particular attention to the knee of the leg that I'm not holding. Okay? If Mateus is on two knees and we're in the single leg situation, it's like so, I'm holding onto his left knee initially. Okay? If Mateus is naive and his right knee is on the mat, it's just so easy just to reach across to the second leg and just finish right there with a double leg on the mat. Okay? So Mateus is a world champion jiu-jitsu player. He's not going to be naive like that. He's going to put his other leg up. And as a result, I can't access the second leg to finish on a double leg. So we're going to have to do something mechanically interesting here to put him in a position where I can finish with a double leg, where I can get to the second leg. Because if I can't access the second leg, it's going to be hell for me to put him down. It's going to be hard work. So how are we going to do this? What's the trick? Let's say his leg's out wide. We're going to hit that same method that we've been looking at to create pressure on my opponent, but I want you to focus your attention on Mateus's right knee. As Mateus applies his wisdom, we're going to go from locked hands to two hands on the floor. We're going to take our knees off the mat. We're going to put our weight on our elbow, our right elbow in this case. We're going to start sweeping around behind our opponent and cupping the knee. Watch Mateus's other knee. It's forced to the mat by the pressure of my shoulder into his hip. He has no choice but to put his knee on the mat. And once the knee touches the mat, it's so easy for me to access the ankle or the knee and put him down. Okay? This is how you get tough, resisting opponents into double legs down on the floor. But not a double leg from in front, but a double leg from behind them. Much easier to finish because you're going with this sprawl instead of against it. So once again, we're in here. As long as Mateus's knee is off the mat, it's very, very hard for me to double leg him. It's very hard for me to get behind him and do any kind of useful work. So we're going to start by taking our hands from locked to unlocked. I'm going to put my elbow on the floor. I have the choice here of cupping his knee. That's always a good choice. And then from here, I start that action of walking around. That puts so much pressure that it literally forces his knee to the mat. I put my knee in behind his ankle, and from here, I go across and I put him down. Now, from your perspective as the viewer, you're not feeling what's happening here. But Mateus will tell you, you feel so much pressure on your hip that you're happy to put your knee down on the floor just to relieve pressure. If the other guy keeps his knee off the mat, it's a very, very unpleasant experience. And mechanically, your knee just goes to the mat. I don't know anyone who's strong enough to stop that from happening. So once again, we're in here and we lock up. Now from this position, look how we just lean into our opponent. Every time I step, his knee comes up, knee up. Look how this action of back stepping puts his knee around the floor. And then I just walk, and we're in a good position now to go across and put him down. From the other side, the mechanical trick of putting that knee on the floor. If I just stay down here and pull, I'll never put the knee to the mat. It's going to be hell. Okay? But by punching through and gripping, or putting my hands on the floor. In this situation, I start that sweeping action. He tries to keep his knee off the mat. Make a strong body, Mateus, don't be polite. Now, strong body, strong, strong, strong. Now from here, just that turn makes it so difficult for him to stop it. Then the knee solidifies it, and we drop him straight down to the mat. This is our favorite method of getting that knee to the floor. Remember, you'll need to get the knee to the mat if you're going to switch to the other leg and complete the double leg from behind. That's your goal. Put pressure on the hip through the mechanical apparatus we've described, which involves going from locked hands to open hands, either cupping the knee or two hands on the floor, taking your knees off the mat, and then walking with one hip higher than the other until you can put your knee behind his ankle and switch to your double leg from behind. That will put his knee on the mat, and that will give you a double leg to work with. Okay, we're looking at this idea of getting out of a punishing side pin courtesy of an underhook. If we can get the underhook, we can get rid of chest-to-chest contact, we can move his head to the same side of his hips, and we can come up to our knees. Once we get to our knees, our first option is the single leg. Why do I value it so much? Because you started in a bottom pin, a position of complete disadvantage, and you got up and you put the other guy down and you got on top. That's a clear expression to your opponent and to the audience if you're fighting professionally that a full reversal has occurred and the match has literally changed its course. Okay, that's a significant development in your fighting skill. If you can turn a match around, that's devastating to your opponent's confidence, and it's fantastic for your own confidence. So I put a high stock on the idea of coming up from the bottom position and with authority putting your opponent down into bottom position. Always love that as a move, and I'm showing you the mechanical apparatus you need to get it done. Now, let's start putting things together. I've shown you a lot of techniques, and it's easy to get rattled by the sheer number of details that we've been over. So let's start putting things together here. How we're going to work from bottom position, get up to the single leg, and put that guy down with some authority. So we've got Mateus on top of us. We know that the path here is the underhook. Okay, let's go back a step, Mateus. Now, getting to an underhook, never easy on a good guy. One of the best ways, one of my favorite techniques, is whenever someone goes into a pin, I just put my hands on my chest, so that even as he comes into the pin, I'm going to get my opportunity to go through into the underhook position, just like so. Okay. Now, from here, with my hands in place, I have an ability to move his body through my underhook. But that's going to require the use of my legs. So we use our asymmetrical bridging technique, where one foot is flat and the other foot points out in the opposite direction. And as a result, we can move Mateus to a situation where my head is underneath his chest. He no longer has the chest-to-chest pin that he favors. Now I hold one-handed, and from here we come up and we've got that grip, either hands down on the floor or coupling our training partner's knee. We use that asymmetrical position where I walk around, I get his knee to the mat, and as a result I can get my knee behind his ankle, and I can either get the ankle here or go across to the knee. Then from here we drive in the same direction he's facing, and always in these situations we finish by running across to the opposite side of our head and ending up in a side pin. So there's a sense in which the beauty of this move is, if it's done well, you trade bottom side pin for top side pin. That's one hell of a trade. So let's have a look at it again. Here we are. My opponent comes in across my side, and look how I form a preemptive frame where everything goes in just like so. Okay. Now from this position, we move our opponent and go in on the legs. From this position, we're taking our knees off the mat. We're putting that pressure on our opponent, getting his knee to the floor, and as a result, I can catch that second leg. Now from this position, my head is on one side and I walk across to the other. So as Mateus tries to put me back in guard, we've now traded position. He was pinning me, and now I'm pinning him. That's always the big goal we're looking for with these single leg escapes out of bottom side control.